From Quito, Ecuador, my name is Carla Gonzalez and this is From the South, the evening news brief on Telesur English. We begin this new edition right now. The final results from Venezuela's local elections show that the United Socialist Party has won 92% of the country's mayoral positions. President Nicolás Maduro says it was a major defeat for the opposition parties that called for a boycott.
They called for abstention and tried to sabotage the elections. But today, we can say, after the mayoral elections have come to a successful conclusion, that the people of Venezuela knew better, and that the elections on December 10th were a total success for this country.
Our correspondent in Caracas, Frederick Gillingham, has the latest update on the country's local elections.
Just to give you a bit of an update from the aftermath of the results from Sunday's mayoral election, it is a massive victory for the ruling socialists. They've claimed about 91% of the mayorships from 23 states across the country. This, of course, has re-empowered its electoral capacity to mobilize its voters and has shed massive light on how the opposition has failed to mobilize its support at this crucial time. The head of the Council of Electoral Experts of Latin America, Nicano Moscoso, gave a press briefing at the beginning of the week on his findings of the results. He described the election, I quote, ran with international standards and national legislation, especially in areas of expression and transparency. So those were the findings from the international delegation earlier this week. The international response has been, well, in terms of the US State Department's response, in true US State Department style, they have slammed the election results, discrediting the millions of Venezuelan voters who came out on Sunday to vote. The incumbent foreign minister of Venezuela, Jorge Arreaza, has responded to that response from the US, saying that he denotes the impotence and desperation of the supremacist government of Donald Trump. That's all we have time for today. Back to you in the studio.
That was Frederick Gillingham from Caracas. The Venezuelan Attorney General Tarek William Saab says he is opening an investigation into Rafael Ramirez, the former energy minister and head of FtS, who resigned as Venezuela's ambassador to the UN earlier this month.
We have decided to open a criminal investigation into Rafael Ramirez, the former oil minister and former president of FtS. Why? Because in one of the documents we have discovered Diego Salazar, the cousin of Ramirez, directly implicating him as his partner in operations to deal in the buying and selling of oil.
And we move to Argentina, where trade unions and social movements have called protest against the World Trade Organization, which is holding a ministerial conference in Buenos Aires. Ministers from Chile, Mexico, Colombia, among others, are at this meeting, which is discussing plans for more liberalization of global trade, including the elimination of tariff barriers. A group of protesters gather outside the conference hall to express their concerns about the WTO agenda. Our correspondent Edgardo Esteban has more details from Buenos Aires.
3,500 people and 164 delegations are present at the second day of the World Trade Organization's ministerial meeting. One field of controversy over the United States' proposals regarding the emerging countries, which have been debated on several occasions. Meanwhile, several demonstrations took place on the streets of Buenos Aires after the government of Mauricio Macri deported 64 activists from the country, sparking criticism around the control that the state is imposing. The free trade agreement proposed between Mercosur and the European Union is expected to create conflict among those present and also expected to spark more demonstrations during the afternoon to question the free trade measures that could generate a deeper economic crisis and more unemployment. A consequence, demonstrators say, of the neoliberal measures of the governments around Latin America and in particular of those who are part of Mercosur.
That was Edgardo Esteban from Argentina. Now, former Argentinian President Cristina Fernández is being accused of treason for her alleged involvement in the 1994 attack on an Israeli community center. Her supporters have come to her defense, and we have more in this report.
Argentinian opposition continues to dispute the detention and dismissal order against Senator Cristina Fernández and other officials accused of treason. They're asking for the end of the harassment against those who think differently than Mauricio Macri's government.
This is an outrage. It's something hard to understand in a place where there's law and judicial security. They're really trying to impose fear and make us think we're in a sort of probation. If there's no judicial security, there are no rights.
Judge Claudio Bonadio's request to remove Cristina Fernández from Congress and send her to prison threatens to further complicate the end of the parliamentary year. Even without support, the government's front will try to go ahead against the senator.
It is clear that all the people who are accused of something and judicially sentenced are members of the previous government, and any denouncement against the current one is disregarded. That's not good for Argentinian democracy. It's not good for the rule of law and shows a weakening of the judicial power and the loss of its prestige.
The Justice Bloc of the Senator Chamber have already put forward its rejection to the order. The dismissal as an instrument of distraction seems to be the objective of the government's party Cambiemos, who's looking to shine a light on legal cases against former officials.
Who knows what could happen to whoever opposes President Macri here? That's what's happening. It's a persecution campaign against political leaders who oppose this government.
This is a violation of the state of law. A judge who clearly responds to the orders of this government is a judge who dishonors the word of justice. We are seen in the world as a place where justice responds to political power.
Regardless of the rejection by most senators, the order against Senator Cristina Fernández will take place next year, and the opposition is not giving up. Complex days are ahead when all eyes will be on the National Congress debates coming up before the end of the year.
World leaders have gathered for the One Planet Summit outside Paris in an attempt to raise money to combat climate change. The summit, which was called by President Emmanuel Macron, was also attended by NGOs, government organizations, as well as entrepreneurs like Bill Gates. Outside the meeting, protesters urged the leaders to stop investing in fossil fuels.
We are here to ask that all financial players, whether public or private, stop investing in fossil fuels and in the infrastructures that have built this non-climate compatible economy, and to ask that we finally have the energy and financing available to meet the challenges in order to finance the fight against climate change and the policies of energy transition.
The World Bank President Jin Yong Kim told the summit that the World Bank will stop financing oil and gas exploration and extraction from 2019.
Today, we're announcing that the World Bank Group will no longer finance upstream oil and gas after 2019. Thank you. Now, just as in our coal policy, we haven't done any coal since 2010, we still leave the possibility that in exceptional circumstances, the poorest countries may need some help, but the policy will change and change dramatically.
One of the entrepreneurs at this summit, Richard Branson, voiced concern for the worst affected parts of the world, such as the Caribbean.
And I think that what he was saying about reclassification is critical. The international community needs to accept that the small island countries, if we're going to continue to have small island countries, they need to be reclassified. They need to be able to access money to be able to help them get back on their feet. They need to be able to access help to get them back on their feet. They need to be able to rebuild their houses in a resilient way.
The Prime Minister of Dominica, Roosevelt Skerrit, was one of the panelists at the One Planet Summit in Paris. Skerrit called on the international community to scale up its investments in building climate change resilience. He said the impact of weather events was becoming more severe and more frequent, and that small island states like Dominica require significant investment in building infrastructure and services. More news in a minute. Stay with us. Honduras presidential candidate Salvador Nasralla has formally challenged the results of the elections held on November 26. The country's opposition has also called for a vote-by-vote recount of more than 18,000 ballot boxes to be carried out by an independent international commission. The Supreme Electoral Tribunal has yet to announce the winner of this disputed race, despite official results that show a lead for the current president, Juan Orlando Hernández. Meanwhile, thousands continue to protest against the alleged fraud. The UN has said its Secretary General, António Guterres, is concerned about the violence that erupted after the presidential elections in Honduras. In a tweet, Guterres' spokesman said the Secretary General is closely following developments in Honduras. The full statement goes on. The Secretary General trusts the authorities will respect the human rights and the rule of law. He also called on the presidential candidates to act with responsibility and encouraged them to resolve their difference through dialogue after the opposition denounced election fraud. Guterres called on Honduras to exercise restraint and uphold the same civic spirit that was shown during the elections. We spoke to our correspondent Heather Gies in Tegucigalpa, who has been following the elections and the aftermath.
The opposition has maintained that they want a full recount of the vote. Their position is that they already won this election, so the votes from this election should be recounted as opposed to going to a fresh election. So as you said in your introduction, on Friday, they officially filed an appeal to the Supreme Electoral Tribunal calling for the vote count that was already completed to be completely nullified, which, if accepted, would logically lead to them being able to press for a new recount of the vote, which they say should take place with independent international oversight, and should also consider a scrutiny of the voter rolls and signatures. They say that this is an important part of making that vote count transparent.
In Chile, former President Sebastián Piñera and his rival Alejandro Guillier have faced each other in the last debate before the second round of the presidential elections, which is to be held on December 17th. Both candidates discussed their programs on economic, health, and education issues. Alejandro Guillier criticized Piñera's past government and talked about working with the majority of the country in order to build a democratic society.
Talking about governability, I'll be able to work with the majority of my country, because I've got the possibility to obtain agreements on some very specific matters, and I think we'll have the majority we need, something that will be very difficult for my opponent to achieve, especially with all the proposals he makes that are clearly opposed to our vision for society, a vision we share on many aspects with the rest of the center-left in our country.
The registration for candidates in Colombia's parliamentary and presidential elections comes to a close on Wednesday. Then the political campaigns will officially begin. More details in the next report.
Monday saw some candidates for the presidency register the signatures from their political movement with authorities in the National Electoral Council. One of them was the far-right candidate Germán Vargas Lleras.
I want to thank the thousands of Colombians who, with their signature, with their support, are allowing us to register a candidacy based on so many dreams, on so many hopes.
The candidate for the progressive movement, Gustavo Petro, also registered his signatures in the Electoral Authority and also questioned why the CNE gave the entire building to Germán Vargas Lleras for his registration. He also denounced the money that was used for the signature collection.
We didn't buy the signatures here. Even the bank account we opened for the organization was closed. We did a national signature gathering with volunteers, with real people who signed. These are 846,000 signatures.
Sergio Fajardo also presented his signatures and invited his followers to what he considers a citizens' electoral celebration.
This is a party, and you're all invited to this party, which is a citizens' party. It's the party of our joy. It's a great pride for us to see how we fought for all those signatures, how we traveled Colombia.
Even though so far there's very little known about the proposals of the candidates, the common denominator is registration of signatures in support of their candidacies. This, according to electoral experts, has happened because of the institutional crisis and the lack of credibility of political parties, leading the candidates themselves to use this mechanism in an attempt to avoid criticism from people.
In Mexico, protesters are back outside the Senate as it debates a controversial internal security law, which has been criticized by civil society and human rights organizations. Our correspondent Pablo Perez has more from Mexico City.
So we're here again standing in front of the Senate doors where a protest has been organized. There are some demonstrators rallied up to organize a sit-up in front of these doors and the other two entrances of the legislative building where the bill of internal security is being discussed right now. It has been discussed for over a week, and both left-wing and right-wing parties are opposing the official party, the party of President Peña Nieto, the Revolutionary Institutional Party, that is trying to pass the bill before the legislative period ends this year. But in this case, right-wing parties are arguing that the law is not specific about, and they are asking for it to be strengthened in some areas. And both human rights organizations and some of the left-wing parties are arguing that the law is endangering human rights and it's giving extraordinary powers to the president in order to control the army, not only for the fight against organized crime, but also for some unconstitutional abilities that it grants the army, as the possibility of eavesdrop on citizens, on even political opponents of the presidency, and dissolve social protests such as this one, if presidency deems them to be against the safety of the citizens. So this is why this law is being so contested, and it's very important because the army is already on the streets in Mexico. It is on 29 of the 32 states fighting against organized crime, and since 11 years ago, when the war on drugs started with President Felipe Calderón, there's been a really high rise of casualties, civil casualties, because of crossfire and dubious extra-official executions. So this is the news right here. This is what's been discussed on the Senate, and we're going to be updating the information. We go back to you.
That was Pablo Perez from Mexico. Over 7 million pilgrims are expected to attend multiple religious ceremonies at the Basilica of Our Lady of Guadalupe in Mexico City. People walking on their knees, holding large images of the Virgin, and other acts of faith are part of this procession as a symbol of devotion, identity, and patriotism. The Virgin of Guadalupe has been a Catholic icon to the Mexican and the Latin American people since the 16th century.
I come every year to thank her for the miracle she gave me. I had an accident and I gave up hope. I could not walk, but that is why I'm here, to keep my promise and to give thanks.
And in Bolivia, doctors who work in state institutions have been on strike for the past 3 weeks in rejection of new sanctions on medical malpractice and control on private practice. More details in the next report from our correspondent Freddy Morales in La Paz.
The doctors have been on strike for 3 weeks. In addition to suspending the state hospital services, they are also marching and blocking streets. Only emergency services are working.
We are on a critical stage. We are taking care of emergencies, but the doctors are also marching. After all, this is a public service, and we can't shut the door on the people.
This week, the victims of medical malpractice decided to take their protests to the streets. Maria's husband came into the hospital for a vesicle problem, but after the surgery, the doctors told them that he had a brain problem and epilepsy.
The truth is that my husband fell in the operation room. A machine fell on his head and that caused him a head trauma.
My 6-year-old daughter died because of medical malpractice. She entered for a scheduled surgery, but they did something wrong. She had a tracheoesophageal fistula on her right lung, but they wanted to remove her left lung.
When they can, patients look for private medical services or they simply wait.
There you have to pay first, then they treat you. I was at the hospital for 23 days. Here, in the general hospital, I would have died.
There's no service. There aren't any doctors. We're waiting for them to come. My brother can't handle the pain.
I need physiotherapy. My arm is injured. I needed 10 sessions, I only did 3. It has been 10 days since they treated me.
The authorities have shown several agreements subscribed to the doctors before and during the conflict that, as they affirm, their leaders do not comply with.
I asked the doctors to read the Article 205. It's on the Senate's website. And we asked them to change their attitude because we are only doing it to protect the life of people.
No tendría lógica alguna que querramos.
There is no logic to persecute professionals, criminalize them. It has no sense at all. That is why I ask our colleagues to read with their own eyes the Supreme Decree and Article 205.
The doctors question Article 205 of the new criminal code that punishes professional irresponsibility, as well as a government decree that will create an audit and quality control agency that will also control the price of private medicine.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Voters have been casting their ballots in Alabama for the U.S. Senate election with all eyes on the results. The spotlight is on Trump-backed Republican Roy Moore, who has been accused of child sex abuse by multiple women who have accused the 70-year-old former Alabama judge of making sexual advances. He denies the claims, but the scandal may have boosted the chance for Democratic candidate Doug Jones to win a seat in the Senate. We spoke to our correspondent Jorge Gestoso in Washington about this vote and the implications for the White House.
It has become the big issue in the U.S., this election, because the story of the day is sexual abuse and sexual harassment. Today, we're talking about 100 congressmen has already been asking congressional investigation about the sexual allegations against Trump. There is a congresswoman, we're talking about Kristen Gillibrand, that she's asking the resignation of Donald Trump, and given the fact of the quote-unquote dark past of this ex-judge Roy Moore that has been denounced by 9 women of sexual abuse, being minors, this issue is a center stage of the whole election and the whole future of Trump's agenda.
In Nepal, the Communist Leftist Alliance is headed for a landslide victory in the parliament. This is the first election under its new constitution. The Leftist Alliance won 113 seats in Nepal's national parliament, while the ruling center-left Nepali Congress Party took just 21. The new government will likely reinstate KP Oli as Prime Minister, who has vowed to stay in office for a full 5-year term, something which hasn't been achieved since 1990. Before this alliance, the communist votes had been divided, but now the unified Marxist-Leninist and the Maoist Center have joined together in a move that people hope will offer government stability and economic development for the country.
Every Nepali citizen felt that the communists of Nepal should unite. They should not be divided, and then develop the nation together. That is why the Left Alliance won.
Supporters of Kenya's opposition leader, Raila Odinga, have suffered violence at the hands of the police. Odinga attended a wake where their family members demanded justice. More details in the next report.
Mourners came to collect the bodies of their family members and demanded justice. Some were hung and murdered because they were Luos. Others were victims of police shootings during the protests. Jeffrey Mutinda was 7 years old when he died on a balcony. Zacharias Bundi was a taxi driver who went to work at 5 a.m.
It was hijacked by the thugs.
Elvis Otieno died of a bullet, leaving his children and his wife, who is now asking for help. She has denounced the government that has looked the other way. George Owino went to work after Mass last Sunday when criminals against the opposition ended up cutting his head off. He was a widower and now leaves 2 children. His brother is thanking the opposition.
I appreciate them. May God give them grace, power, knowledge to continue to be with their people. That's all I can say for now.
The opposition leaders have organized this meeting to denounce the police brutality, and they've provided evidence. The government of Kenyatta and Kenya's ally nations have kept silent about the atrocities. This was Eric Ochieng. He died from a bullet in the forehead on November the 28th, during the forbidden demonstration of the opposition to reject the legitimacy of Uhuru Kenyatta on the day he took office. The families say that they have not received compensation from the government. For the opposition, led by Raila Odinga, who was at the meeting, those who died are the heroes of the revolution. The bullet found in young Jeffrey's body was a police bullet, and Odinga says that the government has to apologize.
We are saddened and shocked at the silence of our so-called friends of Kenya. Yet they have the impudence and audacity to come and advise us, forget and move on. We do not recognize the elections of 26th of October this year, and we will not be intimidated. The Kenyan problems will be resolved by Kenyan people. The will of the Kenyan people is not going to be stopped, it's unstoppable. Yes. We will move and we will do what is right for the people of Kenya.
Family members have received the support of the opposition, although, as in the case of young Jeffrey's mother, Mutinda, the only thing that can calm the pain may be that his death wasn't in vain. These are people who have lost their blood in the Kenya political conflict, and they say that they need to find a solution so that the country can stop bleeding.
And we've come to the end of this evening news brief. As you know, this and many other stories, you can find them on our website at telesurtv.net/English. And you can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.